Introduced alongside the Super Mutants in the original Fallout, the Forced Evolutionary Virus, FEV, has been a long-standing element in the franchise. It gave rise to the said aforementioned Super Mutants, along with the centaurs, floaters, and a number of other creatures and life forms across the wasteland. But as the series progressed, the handle of the virus has changed. Did Bethesda ruin FEV? Let's start off with the main possible lore break, as that is a hot topic. So, quick background on FEV. The whole research originally started off as an attempt to cure the new plague that was discovered sometime before 2055, as that was the year the Glow's Zach's computer, the West Tech's research facility, claims to be the construction date for the facility as a means of researching a cure. The Fallout Bible, which as always has a pretty loose canon, states that the new plague was discovered in 2053. It was socially transmittable, killed tens of thousands of US citizens, and formed the first national quarantine, all while rumors persist that the virus was genetically engineered to be a weapon. In addition, the canceled Fallout 3, Van Buren, was going to have symptoms that were similar to the cold or the flu, eventually resulting in fatal clogged respiration. However, the official Fallout 3's Point Lookout DLC states that symptoms include profuse sweating, unexplained contusions and swelling, and massive external hemorrhaging. Van Buren isn't canon, so its symptoms probably are also not canon. Anyway, let's look at two different logs. FEV Research by Zax 1.2 and FEV Experiments, written by a scientist on the project. So, the Pan-Immunity Virion Project, PvP, was officially formed September 15th, 2073. In 2075, it was decided that the best way to become immune to the new plague was to rewrite the user's DNA and make it so that the new plague just couldn't do anything. March 21st, 2075 is when the FEV took its name. Throughout the various testings, many have saw growth in muscle tissue and size, especially in early 2076. This is basically the point where the US government noticed the results and said, "Ah, sweet, super soldiers," and put a military force on site. Interestingly, Zach says 2076 was the point where the project is dubbed FEV, despite FEB Experiments stating it got its name early 2075. So the FEV2 strand is the one that gave rise to the Master's Army, the Unity. Now, one complaint I see a lot is that FEV, in general, should have been isolated to the Mariposa military base, and that any and all future projects besides the Enclave's experiment, as they took some FEV from Mariposa, breaks the established lore by this very nature. There is something to this, it's not simply an argument produced from SALT. Going back to the FEV experiment disk, the last entry for log date, January 7th, 2077, states the following. Major Barnett has ordered transfer of all FEV research to the Mariposa military base. He plans to continue the project experiment on voluntary subjects. I am against this, and would like to be noted here that research on human subject is not recommended by myself or my staff. All FEV research is noteworthy. It's, well, all-encompassing, everything. So yes, as a very basic bare bones bit, it does indeed break lore. Still, there's some caveats, wiggle room if you will. The log date is January 7th of 2077. If another research program started before this time, then that would fit with the lore. Messy, but it would. The Vault 87 wiki page states that sometime in 2076, the 87 Vault was converted into an FEV lab. Problem is, I can't actually find any source of information on this. That said, 2075 or 2076 is really the only range that makes sense. And it would have to be 2076 because that's the point where the government went, "Ah sweet, super soldiers," at least according to Zax. But still, I can't find a source for this on the wiki. What's confusing is Fallout 3's official guide states that the first Super Mutants were born in 2078, after the Great War of October 2077. However, there's terminal entries stating that the scientists in Vault 87 were feeling pressure by the military at Mariposa and Vault Tech, suggesting pre-war experimentation. However, the game states that there's a lot of Vault dwellers that were experimented on, including Fox. As for the Institute, FEV, I can't really find anything. Could be either pre-war or post-war. That said, Dr. Elliott of the Institute has a log stating that he doesn't want to know where the FEV came from, which suggests that it's post-war, but there's no real clarification. Huntersville is interesting. The West Tech facility there obviously has a direct relationship to the original Fallout game, both facilities being under the same research company, West Tech. Their facility finished construction a little bit after the virus has been named Forced Evolutionary Virus in 2075, and their experiments began shortly afterwards, with Huntersville residents becoming ill in January of 2076. Still, they were continuing research after Major Barnett's orders, according to terminal entries. So perhaps in that sense, yes, it does break lore. Now, the one writing the FEV experiment logs was in regards to the experiments they were running at the West Tech Research Facility, a very specific case. However, yes, it's a retcon. Not the absolute worst one by any stretch, but still, retcon. If the game were re-released and slightly edited to fit the new lore, I see them changing this lore to all FEV2 research or all California-based FEV research. Now moving on, we have to talk about perhaps the most common complaint. FEV is everywhere. Every new game has a source of FEV, short of Fallout 2 and New Vegas. As of now, there's 4 known locations for FEV: Mariposa, Vault 87, Institute, and Huntersville, with a potential 5th one if Weston Lesko didn't get his FEV from Vault 87, a locked up Super Mutant Field Dangerous location. Some suggested he got it from William Brandis, an Enclave deserter that wound up moving to Greyditch and later dying in the ant tunnels. And while I see the reason people come to that conclusion, I don't know why he'd just be running around with FEV. There's nothing to suggest he had any anyway. The biggest issue with the frequent reliance on FEV is that it arguably devalues it. If you tell a joke and you get a laugh, great, you told a funny joke. Suppose the next day you retold the same joke and you still get some laughs. Good, you still told a pretty funny joke. Then the next day, there's only 1 or 2 people that laugh, and awkwardly so. You just killed the joke. This is FEV. It's the joke that has been killed, devalued. Perhaps that seems a little dramatic, but what was FEV? It was a virus that was intended to be used to create super soldiers. Research that branched off the original PvP research. It was top secret, so much that international espionage was a huge concern. The more places that have FEV, the greater the risk of such espionage to happen. So when the government is out there like Oprah going, "You get FEV, you get FEV, you all get FEV," it really flies in the face of that value, that importance. A novelty ceases to be a novelty when it becomes the norm. And if Fallout 5 comes out, you can expect to see new FEV. It's become the norm. It's not a novelty. On the other hand, I can see why FEV research would be so frequent. While secrecy is certainly important, pre-war America was in an arms race. The more money and resources you throw at research companies, the faster you'll get results. 2 West Tech facilities researching FEV does make sense. Vault-Tec doing it is a little more of a stretch, but looking at the fact that Vault-Tec had heavy ties to pre-war American government via the social experiments on a grand scale, as Enclave President Richardson calls it, I can sort of see it. Plus, we know that Vault-Tec was involved in more than just creating vaults. For instance, they created the Zax AI, used by West Tech in Fallout 1 and the US government in Fallout 3. So it's kind of like Google creating cars. They have a number of business ventures. I can see it even though it does feel like it came out of nowhere. And then there's the Institute. We're still not entirely sure where they got their source. It could be pre or post-war, but if it's pre-war, I can see the logic. The Commonwealth Institute of Technology is the Fallout equivalent of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Both gave rise to brilliant minds. The school, both real life and in-game, has a lot of clout. Their influence is so strong, there's a wiki page about MIT in popular culture. Even Mr. House is a CIT graduate. So I can kind of see the US government dumping FEV on arguably the most prestigious scientific university in the world. That said, it's probably pretty risky to have FEV on campus, very likely to be discovered. But again, it's not really confirmed one way or the other. Regardless of sensibility in having various research organizations conducting similar, if not identical, experiments, this argument is about the assumed value of FEV, and that's from the player's perspective, not the world perspective. The player perspective will simply say, "This again?" But perhaps more important than the value of FEV is how it's utilized in the world. The standard is about the same for every game. Super Mutants. They're mostly an excuse for why Super Mutants exist in the wasteland that the game is going to take place. There could be other creatures too, centaurs, floaters, a few creatures in Fallout 76. However, I think a lot of these weird looking creatures could have just been the results of radiation and not require FEV to create them. It feels a little unnecessary to make that a part of it. Then there's the intelligent death clause in Fallout 2, a result of Enclave experimentations with FEV, and the synths need FEV for some reason in Fallout 4. Still, the biggest reason FEV is brought into the new wasteland is to have super mutants. It feels so tacked on. Take out FEV and the super mutants in Fallout 4 and very little of the game really changes. Really, the only significant difference is Strong is gone and Virgil wouldn't be a super mutant. I think the FEV experiments in Fallout I enjoy the most were the ones done to humans that don't turn them into super mutants, such as the Psychers or the FEV mutants. Take for instance Tun Barricus of Fallout 1. He's a member of the Children of the Cathedral, a killer of many followers of the Apocalypse, and an FEV mutant. Not a super mutant, but a mutant of FEV. He claims to be 2,000 pounds of pure muscle, hence the name. If true, that would put him in the range of super mutants in terms of strength. Thing is, he looks like a human. I think mutation like these, Psychers, or examples like Tun Barricus, really do defy what we learned about mutations in Fallout. One that only really affects your appearance to a mild yet noticeable degree, but gives you enhanced or new abilities, is fascinating. It's a potential avenue to explore. A game that has a heavier focus on Psychers and Freaks might be pretty cool. Just something new and unique to actually give FEV that oomph, rather than just being a super mutant factory. Then again, FEV itself is pretty overplayed at this point. So, did Bethesda ruin FEV? They certainly did a fantastic job at devaluing it to the point where it's really just expected to exist so the super mutants can exist. Personally, I think they really should just look at either fixing super mutant sterility or ending the species, so that FEV can be put to rest or just used in rare or special cases so it actually feels valuable again. Mutations are cool though, and FEV is a pretty easy mutant maker. That said, I don't think it has to be FEV. I do wonder if an alternative to FEV should be introduced. Perhaps a private company that signed a contract to develop their own cure and stumbled upon similar, but not exactly the same results. Or perhaps it's not even related to PvP at all. Or perhaps not even pre-war. Then again, there's something to be said if we go the FEV and everything but name route. I don't know, I'm just really spitballing. I do know I'd personally like to see more unique human mutations, and it would have to be something other than radiation. On one hand, I don't want to lose all the non-super mutant mutations that FEV so easily produces. But I don't want FEV to exist along with super mutants because it generally adds nothing new or neat to the world. So far, the super mutants in the East Coast really only exist to be muscular raiders, and that's boring. FEV is the reason they exist, which, again, is boring. In the end, FEV can be considered ruined, mostly because it largely is just an excuse to have super mutants, not because it's truly needed to fill out the world. That's not to say it can't be fixed up, done something new with, but it would be pretty hard to justify, yet again, it exists here, without producing a roll of the eyes. But perhaps opinions could change if FEV was brought in without super mutants and done something unique with. How exactly would that go? It's hard to imagine, but I've been surprised before. Still, it was pretty awesome once upon a time, but you can only tell the same joke so many times before you kill it.